Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. I'm so happy to have you here today. We are going to be having a very important conversation during a month that has many focal points, one of which is mental health. And I didn't want to leave this month without putting a highlight on mental health. As we know, over the past 2 years, it has been hard for everyone, just about everyone, but especially our young people. Being in quarantine for so long, the pandemic, racial conflict and strife, economic conflict and strife, social challenges, just everything has kind of fallen on our shoulders, including on the shoulders of our children. And so there has been a study conducted that is an excellent study looking at the mental health of our children that we're going to talk about today. Let me tell you what it's called: The Impact of COVID-19 on Student Mental Health in Communities of Need. And it is a comprehensive study, really excellent. And two people who are integral to the study are here today to talk with us. They are Dr. Ariana Hoet and Becki Last. Let's welcome them now. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Well, I thank you in advance for all of the great work that has been put into this study. And I want to start by telling you a story, something that just happened this week. I have a daughter who's a senior in high school, and part of her community service is offering tutoring and support at an elementary school in New York. And most of the students come from housing projects that are across the street. And on Monday, she was asked to help tutor one of the students because the teachers hadn't come in. There was a personnel challenge. And she was working with a 9-year-old boy, pulled out a simple book to read with him. And as they began to read, she learned that he couldn't read. He couldn't sound out the simplest of words. As she was trying to make associations, he was unable to make those associations. She said it was very frustrating. She never gave up, but it was frustrating. Equally frustrating because she had been working with him and the dance team prior, and he had been kicked off of the dance team because he had kicked his dance teacher. And so she was sharing with me just how distraught this child was and how frustrating it was for her. I told this to a friend of mine who's a longtime Harlem resident who said, how old was he? 9? He's probably in the third grade. That means he may have never gone to school before now, because if he may not have gone to the beloved pre-K that de Blasio set up, he may not have gone to kindergarten because not every child does. And then first and second grade, he would have been at home because of COVID. So she was saying to me, oh my goodness, there is a generation of young people, especially those who grow up below the poverty line, who are at such an incredible disadvantage, maybe so disadvantaged that they aren't going to be able to climb above that. I heard this and then started reading your study, and it really was devastating to recognize that this could be true. And so I want to start with you, Dr. Hoet. Could you just give us some context as to the state of our children right now?
Yeah, I think that one story is such a good representation of what's going on. Even before the pandemic, the 10 years prior, 2009 to 2019, the CDC released numbers and data on children's mental health. And we were seeing an increase in sadness, hopelessness, suicidal thoughts, and ideation in children. So we were already alarmed. And then the pandemic happened, and it just exacerbated those concerns to the point that the Surgeon General declared a public health crisis in children's mental health in December of last year. So we're definitely concerned at all ages, from early childhood to adolescence, and what's going on right now.
And when the Surgeon General, so this is national, declares a mental health crisis, what does that mean? Are additional resources offered to help to make change? There's a flag being waved, but to what end?
Right. So his report outlines something I think is very important, which is the different levels that impact a child's mental health: the individual, the family, community, environment, technology systems, right? Our government systems. And in that report, he talks about how it impacts mental health, and then what do we have to do. And so it's up to a lot of individual people and our systems, but then also that means we have to change funding and our systems and our laws to help children right now.
Becki, this survey is very comprehensive and somewhat shocking, the results. Can you talk about how the survey was put together and what some of these results are?
Sure. Well, First Book has a wonderful and growing network of over 500,000 educators and practitioners nationwide, all of whom work with kids in need, so kids from low-income communities. Um, we very often survey the network to lift up their voice and keep a finger on the pulse of what is happening on the ground in communities of need. And we especially look to identify barriers to education and what the educators need to help remove those barriers and give kids a shot at an equal education. And so when we heard and for a long time and throughout the pandemic, we had been hearing from our educators that mental health was a concern. To Dr. Hoet's point, it has been for a long time, but the pandemic did exacerbate the issues surrounding mental health and mental wellness. And we wanted to connect with our network and get an understanding of what that meant. And so we did a set of focus groups and then followed by a quantitative survey. And we had over 1,000 educators nationwide, many of whom are from the New York City area, respond to the survey. And the results were just shocking, to your point, because it showed us the severity of the pandemic and that 98% of educators said that they felt like mental health and mental wellness was a barrier to student education today. And what's really shocking is that only 20% of educators in the survey said that they felt prepared to support kids in any way related to their mental health, which means that 80% of educators do not feel prepared to support kids and their mental health and remove that as a barrier to education today.
So those figures are staggering, like jaw-dropping figures. You think about grades in school. If your child gets a 70%, you're worried, right? You're talking about 20%. What is 20% is such an abysmal failure for the teachers, for the educators to feel that they're walking into the school, into the classroom with 20% capability of supporting their students. That has got to mean that they're walking with leaden feet, that they must be almost paralyzed to think, how are they going to take care of these students if they don't have the skills, tools, capabilities that they need? Dr. Hoet?
Exactly that. I mean, I think about burnout, right? It comes from us feeling like we can't do our job or we can't help. And of course, teachers want to educate their students, help their students, support them. And walking in, like you said, every day feeling like I don't know how, and seeing how it's impacting their learning, but their mental health, that's just incredibly hard for teachers to, move forward and keep doing their job without knowing how.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Becki.
I was just going to add that we want kids to do well and learn how to read and learn math skills, but they need to be mentally set up and ready to learn. And if you're hungry, or if you're worried about where you're going to sleep at night, or if you are struggling with mental health related issues in any kind of way, all of which are related, then you're not mentally set up and ready to learn. And so these educators are being asked to do more and more to help make sure that these kids are set up to be ready to learn. And only, according to the study, only 56% of educators nationwide have any PD related to support professional development related to supporting the kids that they serve from a mental health perspective.
That's frightening. It's frightening. And I think of when the pandemic hit, my daughter goes to a public school here in New York City, a really great public school. And I remember as a parent, and now thinking about what you're saying, wait till you hear what I'm going to say. As a parent, being kind of angry that the teachers were saying they're extra stressed out and they don't want to be on the Zoom or whatever the platform is for as many hours as were needed. And as a parent, I'm thinking, are you kidding? I need you to be there to keep teaching my child. And so there was a war of wills in a sense. And I think for the most part, especially all that I'm reading from your study and other things that I've paid attention to, well, we just didn't understand. We did not understand the uh, how difficult it was all the way around, how difficult it was for teachers. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Sure. I mean, the challenges that our educators are facing are kids with, according to the study again, difficult home lives, kids that are struggling with food insecurity, isolation. And those are just three of the top challenges that came up related to mental health in the study. And they were saying what really would be helpful are things, resources to promote general mental health of students, resources, books to support mental health of students, materials that help educators create safe and positive learning environments for students. And that's really why we created, in partnership with On Our Sleeves, our resource to help support educators as they are both from a proactive and a reactive perspective trying to help serve the children in their care.
So what does On Our Sleeves do, Dr. Hoet?
On Our Sleeves is a national movement for children's mental health. Our mission is to give free resources to every community in the US. And the resources are focused on the adults. So teaching the adults how to promote the mental health and well-being of children. So I think about On Our Sleeves the same way we teach kids to eat healthy and exercise for their physical well-being. It's what do we do for their mental well-being? So really promoting that mental health starting at an early age.
And when you say promoting their mental health, let's get specific. What are some examples of how you do that?
Good question. So we start basic, like good sleep, good routines and schedules. We do things like how do you create social connections with your community, with your family. Right now in May, we're talking a lot about conversations. We launched Operation Conversation, which is again teaching the adults how to start the conversation with children, especially tough conversations, and then how to keep it going. If a child starts talking and now I'm hearing something concerning or that I'm alarmed by, how do I react in a way that won't shut the child down and in a way that the child feels good for sharing and will keep coming back to me? And so those are just kind of some of the resources we have for parents, caregivers, and teachers, coaches, any adult with a child in their life.
So let's dig into that one a little bit more. When a child opens up and starts talking, I've seen so many adults jump in and just drown the children out with their opinions on whatever the child is saying, or if they're worried, their lecture.
Yeah.
What do you recommend when a child starts talking for an adult to do so that the conversation can continue?
You know, as adults, our jobs are to guide our children, right? But if we immediately jump in with that guidance and question, the child, like you said, feels drowned in that conversation. So we recommend taking that step back, holding your thoughts and feelings to yourself for a moment, and letting the child guide. So listen, say things like, tell me more about that. And then I recommend asking first, what do you want to do? What do you need from me? Because we also want to empower the child to learn to problem solve on their own and not jump to their rescue every time. And then once we get past the listening and the empowering them and letting them problem solve, then we can say, okay, I have some more questions or I have some advice. Are you ready to hear it? The child may need a break and say, no, I'm not. And that's okay. Okay, let's take an hour break. Let's come back and then we'll keep going. So, really respecting the child's needs and emotions at that time over and above ours.
And that can be so difficult. Let me remind folks you're listening to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole here on WBAI in New York City. That's 99.5 FM and everywhere online at WBAI.org. Today, we're talking about mental health, the mental health of children across this country, recognizing that we are in a mental health crisis. That's what the Surgeon General said. We're not making it up. It is something that has been acknowledged at the highest level. I think many of us knew already. We are looking at each other, at our children and our families, and recognizing that there are problems, real problems that people are having. And especially for our young people, we want to do absolutely everything that we can to support them. And so there is a study that has just come out called The Impact of COVID-19 on Student Mental Health in Communities of Need. You know, whenever there's a challenge, it hurts in communities of need more. And this is proven out. This study has some alarming statistics in it. And we are talking about all those things now with Dr. Ariana Hoet and Becki Last, who are bringing this study to us. Um, Dr. Hoet, when you look at some of the things that have occurred with young people in, you said, over the past 10 years, and now it's just been exacerbated in the past two, I think of suicide being at much higher numbers than we saw some years ago, at drug abuse, at alcohol abuse, at sexual promiscuity at very young ages, before you really understand yourself and your body. Um, when we see these kinds of things occurring, what can lay people do? What can parents do? What can teachers do?
I think one of the biggest things that we can start is checking in with the children, talking with them. Kids want to feel seen, heard, and supported. And so having daily check-ins with them where we ask them what they're thinking, how they're feeling, what their experiences are. And then as I was mentioning earlier, allowing them to problem solve and share. That's just a very basic place to start, so that we can support them. We also know the CDC just released a study about a month ago that asked high schoolers directly about their experience during the pandemic. And one of the things they found is that social connections and school connections, school belonging, was a very high protective factor for the stress of the pandemic. So, as adults, helping kids feel a part of their school, connected to their peers, having that sense of belonging and goals and future planning is a very big protective factor.
Which it is so incredibly important. Becki, in the study, it says one takeaway on average, educators estimate that over half of the students they serve struggle with their mental health. Over half. This is huge.
53%, yeah.
What happens for the educators when they're walking into classroom, walking into school, and they already know before they can get to the math problem on the board, before they can get to, the book that they're reading, that what's in front of them is some kind of mental health challenge. What can educators do in order to support and reach their students when this is a fact for them?
That's a great question. And it's interesting. We heard that 93% of our educators became aware that a student was struggling because of a change in behavior. And that's actually why we worked with On Our Sleeves to create what we're calling Taking Care, an educator guide to healthy habits for student emotional wellness. It's to help those educators be able to do something in their control. The guide is not meant to be a replacement for a school social worker or a school psychiatrist or any kind of professional assistance or help in the mental health space. It's just meant to give educators a starting point. So the first half of the guide looks from a proactive perspective on how you increase mental wellness generally among the students that you serve. How do you help remove anxiety, increase resilience? And the second half of the guide really looks more from okay, what do I do as an educator when I am faced with a challenge with a single student and I'm having a really difficult time and I need to respond and we don't have the resources in place that I can turn to. Another shocking result from the study was actually, I think it's 60% of educators in the study reported that their schools don't have any child psychiatrists.
Yes, I saw that.
And so this guide was really meant to help support, and it leans a lot on the wonderful resources that On Our Sleeve provides to help inform educators in a really digestible way. How can they do that, and what can they do to support the kids they serve?
You know, Becky, when you bring that up, that most schools do not have a mental health expert, a psychologist or psychologist, I learned something, at least again, I'm in New York City schools. I learned that most schools don't even have a nurse. That was just mind boggling that in a whole school, however many students from hundreds to thousands, that the health professionals, both physical and mental health professionals, that we don't have enough. And during COVID, because of, I think, union rules where they weren't required, mental health professionals weren't required to be vaccinated, whereas by whatever governing body there was, there then became fewer available, because if the schools required vaccination, but whatever their governing body is didn't, then you lost even more. So COVID, because I know your study is about the impact of COVID on this, that just made it even worse. Dr. Hoet, can you give us some understanding of the direct negative impact that COVID-19 has had on students and educators?
Absolutely. One thing that I noticed as a practicing clinician was the impact it had on the immigrant community
Mm.
for the kiddos whose parents didn't speak English.
Mm.
And I saw that our first book survey, I think it was 48% were families that didn't speak English. So it was hard because parents didn't even understand what was going on. Our kids went on spring break, and all of a sudden it was extended spring break, and then it
Yeah.
was just a few more weeks, and then that turned into months, right? And parents weren't understanding what the school was even sending them, right? And then kids started to do this distance learning. It went from a break to actually doing school from home, and the parents didn't speak the language to support the child. And so what I saw a lot was either the older sibling having to help the younger sibling while also figuring out their own learning. But then just saying, like, I'm learning on my own. I feel so much pressure. And when we hit a certain level of stress, we just disengage, right? We cannot keep focusing and feel motivated. And so I just saw that happen so much, where kids just stopped logging on. And then now the parent is facing getting in trouble with the school because the child isn't logging on. And so it just became this snowball of the stress from being sent home to learn from home.
I remember watching, again, older kids, because my daughter's in high school, and listening to her tell me stories of friends when they're going in a couple days a week or not at all, and because it was elective whether you could go in or not, and a level of depression that was kind of almost like a cloud falling over so many of the students. And we did everything in our power, my husband and I, to keep her uplifted. And then at a certain point, months and months in, when the main thing that she was doing when not doing her studies, she's an excellent student, was sleeping. for hours and hours. And she likes to sleep. She's a teenager. So we just really chalked it up to that. And I want to tell you that at about, a few months before going back to school proper, she said to me, Mommy, I thought I was depressed. I thought I was paying attention. And here's my child. She had told me about other people. She said, yeah, all I could really do was sleep. As someone thinking I'm aware, I had no idea that my child might also be depressed. So I'd like for you to share, what does that look like? What are the signs that parents and providers should look for in their children? Because I swear I didn't
Right.
see.
Right. No, it's a really good question. And, depression and anxiety in psychology, we call them internalizing disorders because they're internal. And that means we feel them, but others may not notice. And you mentioned something that I hear a lot, which is, how do I know the difference between a teenager and the changes that they go through versus something like depression?
Right.
And so we look for various signs in children. So first, we want to look for change in their mood. Teens sure may show sadness, but what we see a lot is irritability. Things make them angry easily. So that's sadness, irritability, nervousness. And we're looking for patterns here that last a long time. So it's normal for a teen to get irritable sometimes, but if it's happening every day for over 2 weeks at a time, small things, nothing can seem to help them control that mood, that's a sign. We also look for withdrawal. So nothing is fun, nothing is interesting. I don't want to be around anyone. I just want to be in my room and do nothing. That lack of fun in life, you notice that change. We notice changes in, like you mentioned, sleep habits, sleeping more or less, changes in appetite, eating more or less. And then in terms of for kids where we're looking out for risk factors, when there's hopelessness, guilt, worthlessness, those comments about just life isn't worth living, thinking of hurting themselves, or talking about their friends thinking of hurting themselves, those are signs that we need to ask them directly about thoughts of suicide.
It's interesting you mentioned the lack of social interest. And I think the big difficulty there was during COVID. I mean, like, I didn't let my child go see anybody.
Right.
We were very strict. Some of her friends were allowed to go see each other. Most of them got COVID and survived, but we didn't allow that. So
Mhm.
you can't, that factor, yeah. I mean, her friendships changed,
Yeah.
but it was what we thought was for a good reason. But there's
Mhm.
a fine line there too, right?
Right. And we also have to consider, what is a normal response to being isolated because of the pandemic, right? There are so many children that had symptoms of depression, but that's normal because I'm not going to school. I'm not getting to see my friends. And so I talk to a lot of kids and I would tell them, you're not a robot, you're going to feel. Um, And so in those cases, it's about doing the best we can to change that cycle that we can get stuck in. Um, but at the same time, being accepting and understanding that, yeah, you feel depressed right now, and that makes sense because a lot of people do in this situation.
And of course, that feeling happened regardless of age. Let me remind folks, you're listening to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole here on WBAI in New York City. That's 99.5 FM and everywhere online at WBAI.org. We're talking about mental health today. Very, very serious topic. And we're focusing on our children, which, our children are our future. And the COVID-19 crisis has dramatically negatively impacted the mental health of many, including our children. And we're here to talk about a survey that's taken a really good, deep look at that. I want to remind everyone who is listening, if you are in earshot of me, it means you're part of the BAI family. And we appreciate you so much. We are 62 years old, this radio station, this progressive radio station in New York City that has seen so much. And what we love about WBAI is that we have 24-hour programming where people come on and tell the truth. as we know it, well-researched truth, not espousing just whatever people think, but we bring on guests who know what they're talking about, who've done their research, who are looking to share insights so that we can lead more informed and better lives. And we exist because of you. And we welcome your contributions because we do not accept ads. So we are literally listener sponsored. So if you feel inspired to make a contribution today to WBAI, you can call us at 212-209-2950. We appreciate you and we need you. We turn lights on and have our big tower in Times Square and all the things to make sure we can communicate with you because of your contributions. So please do call us 212-209-2950. You can also go online at give2 WBAI.org and make a contribution, either a one-time contribution, or you can become a BAI buddy, which means you make a donation every month to ensure the health of our radio station. And so we appreciate you and appreciate you taking the time to support us so that we can support you with this incredible programming. Today, we are talking about a study that's looking at the impact of COVID-19 on our children, our students, and educators. And with us today, we have Dr. Ariana Hoet and Becki Last, who are integral to this study that is chock full of easily understood, digestible information that will shake you, but hopefully the shaking will help us all to take action. Becki, there's so many facts that and figures that you've pulled out that I think are pretty alarming, but important for us to know. What else do you think is critical for us to know about the study?
I think it's just critical to understand that educators are dealing with a lot right now, and in general, and especially in supporting the mental health of the kids that they serve. And it's just critically important that we support them, so that they can be successful and help support the kids nationwide.
And I had mentioned earlier how I know I'm not alone. There were many parents who, at a certain point, were mad at the teachers. Why can't you do more? The administrators, you have to do more. Looking for a lifeline from them and not necessarily recognizing that they needed their own lifeline. Um, your study really points that out. Uh, what what are you recommending moving forward that would create the lifeline that will help the educators and the students? Becki?
Well, I think, first of all, you can go to firstbook.org and get access to both the study and to the resource Taking Care, an educator guide to healthy habits for student emotional wellness. And if you are an educator or a practitioner working with kids in need, to sign up with First Book so that you can get access to this resource, as well as other resources that First Book provides, and free and low cost educational resources and other informational downloadables like this one, to help. All of the resources that First Book provides are grounded in the research that we do of the network that is designed to help support educators in removing barriers to education for kids in need. So that's the first thing that educators can do. But I did want to say, Harriette, in response to a comment that you made a moment ago, I am always blown away by the educators in the First Book Network. And we've got just over 27,000 of them in New York City alone, just to give you about 5% of our nationwide network is in New York City. But they are often heroes wearing multiple hats in a community. They're working with kids in a classroom. They're working with kids in after-school programs. They're tutoring. They're home visiting. They're working in food banks and in homeless shelters. They're not just they're doing summer programming. They're not just wearing the educator hat. And during the pandemic, these educators were bending over backwards, to make sure that their kids had what they needed to be successful. We had countless educators that were getting resources from First Book and doing drop-off deliveries at their home of books and other resources. So because they knew that their kids had nothing and they wanted their kids to have something to read or some access to an educational resource that could help them during this time. So I think these are a group of people that are thirsty for the support, any support that we can give them, whether it's professional development or highlighting best practices from folks like On Our Sleeves, who have been working to create such incredible support tools that are incredibly actionable for this community.
And so, Becki, just because I did not ask you this before, and for folks who do not know, tell us exactly what First Book does, when it was created. Who is this organization?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Today is actually our 30th anniversary. So First Book has been, thank you. First Book is a 30-year-old nonprofit social enterprise, and our focus is on removing barriers of education for kids in need so that they have a shot at an equitable, so the kids in need have a shot at an equitable education. And so what that means, we serve all of the educators and practitioners nationwide who support kids in communities of need. And we provide free and low cost educational resources and books to help those educators do their job. So to Dr. Hoet's point, they don't feel burnt out and they are able to feel more successful.
Structured, and how do you get the professionals who provide this support?
So all of our, everything we do is based on the feedback of the First Book Network, which is over 500,000 strong and growing. Wow. Nationwide. We listen to their needs and to what they are identifying as a barrier to education. And then we go out and find the foremost experts in those topic areas, or we curate the best resources based on our own internal expertise and bring all of those resources and expertise and best practices together to help support those educators and remove those barriers to education. So when we heard from our network how much they were struggling with supporting the mental health of their children and how that was rising to a top need, we reached out to our friends at On Our Sleeves and Nationwide Children's Hospital to partner together and bring these incredible resources and these very actionable tips and tricks to our educator network in a way that they can easily digest and take action on.
And how are you funded?
We are funded in a number of ways. We're a social enterprise, and we run what it looks like a e-commerce site. It's a nonprofit e-commerce site. And so part of the funding, or about half of our funding, comes from a small portion of funding that is made available through every low-cost resource that goes out through our e-commerce site. And then we are lucky in that we have a number of corporate partners that support First Book, and the children that we serve and the educators that we serve, and are interested in getting resources and wonderful programmatic materials out into the community. And so we're partially corporate partner funded through their corporate social responsibility work. And then we have individual donors that contribute to First Book as well as foundations.
So, during this period when it has become so apparent, the difference between what lay people call the haves and have-nots, people in need and people with abundance, it's become so much more apparent during the pandemic because the needs became more obvious. How did First Book respond just in terms of being able to handle the needs that you discovered? I mean, obviously you decided to partner with On Our Sleeves to make this survey, but just in general, and I'd like to ask the same of you, Dr. Hoet, how did you respond to the bigger need that became so apparent during this period? First, Becki.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of my favorite examples. So one of the challenges that we heard, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, was around the need for connectivity and devices, especially in communities of need. And so First Book was lucky enough to partner with folks like Intel and Lego Education Solutions to bring tens of thousands of free Chromebooks and PCs to communities of need nationwide. We were able to bring thousands of Lego Education Solutions to these kids in the neediest communities nationwide. And that's just one example. We also, as a second quick example, were able to leverage our network at the time, again, right when the vaccine started coming out and there was hesitation around getting vaccinated. We were able to tap into our network to really understand um, the reasons behind the hesitation in different communities and pull together expertise from various sources to address some of those concerns so that more folks could get vaccinated, because what that meant was that kids could then get back to learning, whether that was learning in person or even learning virtually. Again, kids weren't mentally set up and ready to learn if they were concerned about getting sick. And so there was real need from a barrier to education perspective to get more folks vaccinated.
I mean, both of those are incredibly good points. I remember, again, in New York City, there was the mandate that every childhood needed an electronic device, computer or a tablet, would be given one. If you couldn't afford it, you were going to get it. That is a promise that was incredibly difficult to fulfill for many reasons. But it is true that many private organizations stepped up to support. And so I'm glad that yours was one of them, because we know it be, for the students who didn't have those basic resources and couldn't get into the schools at first, how are you going to do a digital class
That's right.
if you don't have a device to do it on? How are you going to do your homework and turn it in if you don't have internet? You know, all of those things became, again, you see the disparities between the haves and have-nots. Dr. Hoet, for your organization, I know, because you have lots of tools that you offer, first of all, did you feel that the need got greater during COVID, that the requests, the pleas for help were greater and louder, and how did you respond?
Absolutely. I think, we knew that there was this trend of mental health in children becoming a concern. I don't think people outside of the mental health world were as aware until the pandemic. And so all of a sudden we started to get these requests exactly as you said. And so for me, On Our Sleeves is really important because we have really good science and research happening, like during COVID, what helps children, what helps their mental health. But those findings, they're not reaching the communities that need them, right? People are not reading these peer-reviewed journals. They're not going to academic conferences. And so On Our Sleeves is there to disseminate those findings and disseminate that science in a language that is more engaging and clearly understood. And that's what I love about On Our Sleeves, because people turn to Google or their community, their neighbors, and sometimes don't find helpful information. And having On Our Sleeves, they're giving them real information that we know helps. We also, whether it's through our website or e-community, we send a weekly email with a new resource. And we also do community talks. So we will have partnerships. For example, we have a partnership with Boys and Girls Club where we will do talks about mental health, and give those trainings and resources to the people that are needing them and asking for them.
And do you offer multilingual resources to help students? You mentioned before the families that are not first language English.
We do, and it's something that we're working on getting better at. A lot of our downloads, for example, Operation Conversation, they're all in English and in Spanish. We have other teacher curriculums we have created that are also in English and in Spanish. with first book, the letters that were sent home to the parents so that they were aware there was the English and Spanish option. So it is something we're working on. I'm Spanish speaking myself, and so we're working on creating more videos for our YouTube channel in Spanish and slowly growing our content.
And of course, another challenge is that there's so many other languages that are spoken, and trying to support folks who speak other languages. Let me remind you once again, you're listening to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole here on WBAI in New York City. That's 99.5 FM and everywhere online at WBAI.org. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I'm hoping that as you all have been listening, you're recognizing we all need to take care of our mental health. If you know that idea of putting the mask on your face, and if you're on an airplane, taking care of yourself first before taking care of even your child. Because if you don't take care of yourself, there's no hope. What we're talking about today is taking care of our children and recognizing that our children and those who teach them are suffering. I mean, we're seeing from this survey that the percentages are at the very top, too close to 100%, quite frankly, of people who are in desperate need of support because they're having mental health stress and strife. And this survey shows what's happening, and we need to all read it and figure out what we can do to support our students and those who teach them, and keep this conversation going. And part of how we can do that is by supporting our beloved radio station, WBAI. And so I remind you, WBAI family, we need your support more than ever. You know, things are not getting cheaper, they're getting more expensive. Folks talk about inflation and how it's just killing their wallets. Well, ours too. So any contribution you make of any size matters. And sometimes when we say that, people go, that's not true, I only have a little bit. But if you talk to people who so-called call themselves poor, people who really feel that they're poor almost always make another plate for somebody at the table if somebody comes by the house and doesn't have anything to eat. Make a little pallet on the floor so somebody can sleep, even when they don't have much. It's often when people have a lot or in the middle, they go, oh, whatever I would give is not going to matter. Every penny matters. And so we invite you to make a contribution of any size by calling 212-209-2950. Just call and say you want to make a pledge. You can make it in the name of Dreamleapers. You can become a BAI buddy and make a monthly contribution, or you may just be inspired today to make a contribution right now. We welcome your contributions and thank you in advance for them. 212-209-2950. You can also go online at give2wbai.org. And for these last few minutes that we have with Dr. Ariana Hoet and Becki Last, I just want to talk about what we can do moving forward. Everybody who's listening is listening because they care. They want it to be better. You want it to be better. That's why you did this, so we could see where we are. And hopefully when we take the temperature next year, the figures are not as dire as they are today. So Dr. Hoet, let me start with you. If you could tell people what they can do to make a difference, just the regular person, what would you say?
I will say for educators, downloading the resource at firstbook.org. It's available to everyone for free because it gives you things that you can do in your classroom every day that don't take a lot of time because we know teachers are busy. If you are a parent, a caregiver, a family member, onursleeves.org, sign up for our e-community. You will get one email a week that gives you an actionable resource to try at home with the kid in your life to really promote that mental health. Don't wait until you're worried. Start those conversations and those habits now.
And I know you mentioned some things earlier, but perhaps there are people who've signed on later. Can you give us a couple of examples of what they might see in the newsletter? What can I do today? Just something that they can actually do.
Sure. So, for example, the email that went out today was on how to set rules and boundaries with your children in a way that gets them to listen and doesn't create conflict between you and the child. And so that's just one example, but we'll send things like how to get good sleep habits, how to get ready for back to school in the fall, or some mental fitness challenges. So different activities for the home and the community.
You're bringing up something that I think of as establishing discipline and structure, which sometimes when parents think that their children are especially stressed out, and also if they want to be their friend even more than a disciplinarian, they relax some of that
Mhm.
structure. And during COVID, everything changed. I mean, the structure was gone.
Mhm.
And so, how important is structure for mental health?
It's the most important, I will say. I think anytime I start therapy with someone, that's where I start, is the routine and structure. Children and adults, we all need that routine and habit to feel a sense of control, to know what to expect. And that's one of the reasons COVID was so difficult, is that routine and expectation went out the window. So definitely, even like you mentioned, even if we're going through a hard thing as a family, we may feel like, oh, I feel bad, I want to give some flexibility. That's actually when the child needs their structures and habits the most, because that's the one thing that they can control versus whatever big stressor may be going on.
This is so important, and why I'm glad that we have you. And we were talking offline about the 12 plus years of education that you had to get to where you are today. I'm mentioning that because you're an expert. And one of the things that was said, and I saw lots of public service announcements over the period of quarantine saying, if you need help, reach out, call this number, get support. Even if you don't have insurance, there's a mental health professional who can help you. And I also talked to a lot of people who said, oh, I couldn't do that. I can't afford it. I'm too ashamed, whatever. The no, no, no. Why should one reach out to a therapist, Dr. Hoet?
You know, kids don't come with instruction manuals. And that is, I'm lucky that I got to go to school to learn about what can we do, what are the things that we can do to support a child's mental health. And so that is why every child, every adult is going to experience emotions. They're going to experience thoughts and stress. And so turning to a mental health professional can be really helpful, just to learn from their knowledge. And you don't have to do it for forever. Even just a few appointments to learn a few skills to then try at home can be really helpful.
Thank you. And Becki, the 30 years I think you said the first book has been around, what would you say is a takeaway today compared to, when this organization began in terms of supporting folks moving forward? What do you see?
Well, from a first book's perspective, we have really, as we've grown over the 30 years and as we've grown our network over the 30 years, we've really shifted our focus because we realize the responsibility and the power in the voices of the network that we serve and in the conversation that we have with them. So when you have 500,000 and growing, or 525,000 and growing folks in your network nationwide, all of whom work with kids in need, it's really important for us to be lifting up their voices, because we are the largest and fastest growing network of educators supporting kids in need specifically. And so understanding what's happening on the ground and lifting that up so that others can take action and provide support is a really important responsibility that First Book takes very seriously.
And we certainly appreciate, an organization that's been around that long. I know there's so much knowledge that you have, and every bit of that knowledge is needed today as we look to help heal our communities and make the opportunity for education the healthiest that it can be. Because as we know, if we don't take care of our young people and help them to become fully engaged, healthy citizens, what kind of a world are we going to be living in? We don't want to know that. So we want to fix it right now. So tell us before we go, where can people access the study?
Go to firstbook.org and you will be able, right from the very front page, to access the mental health piece on the website, which will take you to both the study and the downloadable resource. And if you are an educator working with kids in need, we want every single educator who works with kids in need to be connected to First Book and be able to take advantage of the wonderful resources that we are able to provide. So be sure, if you are an educator, to sign up for First Book for free. And then you will have access not only to this study and this resource, but again, to the other incredible resources we have on topics like grief and loss, climate change, it is, and all of the wonderful free and low cost books and educational resources that First Book provides.
Great. And where can we find the resources from On Our Sleeves?
onoursleeves.org.
And what are we going to get there?
You can find information there on the website. You can also sign up for the e-community, where you will get an email every week with the resources. And there's downloads and videos and readable articles for anyone.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you so much. The study is The Impact of COVID-19 on Student Mental Health in Communities of Need. We've been in conversation with Dr. Ariana Hoet and Becki Last, who worked so hard to bring this study to us. We thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.